Hey folks, it's Jared Mannanen from the website TahoeTrailGuide.com. Today I'm bringing you a bit of a patchwork quilt of a project in the form of this backcountry cross-country skiing recap from my 2019 and 2020 winter season. The reason I say a patchwork quilt of a project is simply because I captured all the footage and photos on different days, meaning different weather conditions, as well as using different types of cameras. At the beginning of the season, I hadn't even really considered making this summary of the season or recap of the season or anything like that. I don't have a whole lot of footage from the beginning and much more toward the end. All of that said, it's kind of par for the course with my life. I'm always learning on the go, as well as exploring new avenues and new expressions for creativity, so I hope you enjoy what I have for you today. Keep in mind, though, it's not a how-to video. This is simply a summary of my experience during the 2019-2020 winter. I like to produce videos such as this because it provides people a different look as to what cross-country skiing could be for them. So many people associate cross-country skiing with, your grandmother taking a pair of old 1970s skis out into the meadow behind their house for like 1 or 2 days a year. Or it's associated with high-speed, low-drag, cross-country ski racing, skate skiing, and that sort of thing. Mind you, I do work at a cross-country ski center on the north side of Lake Tahoe, where I work in the rental shop. I'm a cross-country ski instructor, and I'm a helper when needed on ski patrol. Every winter that I work at the cross-country ski resort, I'm always asked by numerous people about cross-country skiing in the backcountry, in the backyard, off track, off trail. Because when they come to the resort, they see the groomed trails with tracks and a skate lane. They assume that this is cross-country skiing and this is it alone. But when I tell them about how where I live on the south shore of Lake Tahoe, we have very few actual groomed trails or resorts or ski areas, that I usually just go out in the backcountry, the look of confusion and wonder inspires me to tell them a little bit more about it. So I like to produce these videos just to show people, like, yes, you can go out there and do some fun stuff. You still have to keep safety in mind, and you should definitely be snow and avalanche aware. But it is possible to get out there, even if you're not super experienced. You just simply have to pick more favorable terrain, lower angle type stuff. And that's mostly what I stick to. I don't do steep and deep terrain or anything like that. I'm mostly going for miles and just to see some cool stuff out in the winter where nobody else is at. I do a little bit of everything. I spend half of my season practicing my technique, whether it be classic cross-country skiing or skate skiing, on groomed terrain. So I use all of that technique that I learned on groomed terrain, aka a more controlled environment, in the backcountry. And I do prefer classic cross-country skiing over skate skiing for the simple fact that it is universal. You can use all of those techniques in classic skiing in ungroomed terrain or off track or on old dirt roads, logging roads, snowmobile trails, that sort of thing. Skate skiing is a bit more restrictive in that you do need a relatively firm surface and flat surface. But you'll see in this video there's at least one day that I've had somebody film me doing a little bit of skate skiing. So here's that clip of me skate skiing in the backcountry. I happen to be on a frozen lake with about 2 or 3 inches of slushy, soft, melted snow on top, which makes for a really nice environment for skate skiing in the backcountry, but it's about the only environment in which you can do it on. It doesn't need to be a lake. It just needs to be a flatter surface that's uniform in firmness. But as you can see in here, I'm not actually on skate skis. I'm on a pair of Fisher S-Bound 98s, meaning 98mm width tip, backcountry cross-country skis with scale pattern, metal edges, and a pronounced side cut. But you can totally skate ski on that type of ski. It's just not as fun because it's a lot more work, having to deal with that side cut, the wide, heavy skis, and the scale pattern underneath them. But I like the idea that kind of leads me into this other concept about cross-country skiing and what I've tried to embrace while I've learned to ski. I've only been cross-country skiing since the winter of 2014, 2015. And that winter at Lake Tahoe was essentially a drought winter. So I only skied like 12 times that year and was on really terrible conditions. But the passion for cross-country ski was essentially instilled within me that season. So I've continued on. The point that I was trying to make is that each year I tend to have some type of goal or purpose that I would like to fulfill during the season. Up until last year, it revolved around learning better classic diagonal striding technique. And the reason I've really embraced classic skiing is because, again, I do live in a place where there's not a whole lot of groomed terrain. So for half of the winter, I'm skiing off track and off trail in the backcountry. Classic skiing works great for that. This past year, there was two things that I really wanted to focus on. One was learning how to skate ski, and the other was learning some better downhill techniques. I'm still lacking in those downhill techniques, but that's okay. It's a fun learning process. And as far as the skate skiing goes, one of the wonderful benefits of learning to become a better skate skier is learning how to more effectively and appropriately transfer my body weight from one ski to the next. In classic cross-country skiing and diagonal striding, you're mostly going forward. Your skis are pointed in a forward direction, you're pushing off in a forward direction, and you're gliding in a forward direction. But there is a subtle weight transfer laterally in classic skiing because, for example, if you were just standing there with your feet hip-width apart, you removed one of your legs, you would fall towards that leg that was removed, right? Your body wants to naturally maintain a balance, and if it has no means to do that, it's going to fall over. So when you lose that one base of support, i.e. one of those legs, you have to compensate by shifting your weight over to the existing leg just a little bit. With skate skiing, though, it's a more lateral motion that you're transferring your weight. You're not pushing off to the front, you're actually pushing off laterally, and because your skis are essentially pointed forward, you glide forward. That weight transfer is something really critical to allowing yourself to rest while you're skiing, because if you can't effectively transfer all your weight onto one leg, you're constantly straddling those skis, whether you're doing classic or skating. You just need to understand that when you transfer your weight, you're transferring it all from one ski to the next.
Oh, how was I good?
So the two main things that I worked on for 2019 and 2020 was skate skiing, primarily that weight transfer in a lateral direction, and downhilling technique, which included both parallel turns and telemark turns. I got great at neither one of those, but I gained more experience. And we have some first-person perspective as to what the reality of cross-country skiing in the backcountry can look like sometimes, at least after a pretty big dump of fresh snow. Here I think we got about a foot or two. No matter how much technique you know, it can end up just being a slow, steady slog, much like a snowshoe hike. But the landscape and visual experience of a day like this is incredible. And what I'll usually do, other than bring out my widest skis and hope that I'm in really good shape, is to go ahead and lay tracks for myself or try to link up with tracks laid by somebody else. And then I'll just take those back the way I came so that maybe I'll be able to do some diagonal striding. Chances are, if you're in a location that actually gets some traffic, you know, other people who are out there backcountry, cross-country skiing or backcountry skiing or snowshoeing, you're going to find some tracks that are already laid out for you. I wouldn't expect them, but they can be there. And when they do, then you can start using traditional technique. In the meantime, if you do go out and break trail like I do, at least you're setting up for the days to come, and you're also making it nice and convenient for other people to be out there cross-country skiing as well. Part of that is like this little community aspect of everyone making a more enjoyable experience for the next person by laying tracks and doing some of that grunt work. And here at this location, we have another situation where there's a lot of fresh snow, but I'm actually on pretty narrow skis, a set of 62 millimeter cross-country skis. Because people have already been out here laying tracks, and because I've been out there laying tracks, I have the ability to do diagonal striding through this amazing looking landscape. At this point in the video, there's going to be a series of me practicing my downhilling turns, as well as just doing diagonal striding across the flats out in the back country. Again, this is not necessarily a how-to video, and I'm probably not the best person at this point to teach anything about downhilling skills, because based on watching this, it's pretty obvious I'm still struggling with it. But I gain more confidence every time I go out. And again, the 2019-2020 season for me was really about putting time in doing specific things. So learning weight transfer on skate skiing and learning downhilling techniques on the hills. And that's kind of how I tend to live my life. I get passionate about a thing, and I just keep hammering away and trying to get better at it. I also watch videos, read books, ask questions. Because I work as a cross-country ski instructor and I work with cross-country ski instructors, I'm always asking them for feedback on my technique. For me, the whole cross-country skiing experience has been one in learning to learn. I totally embrace the immersive experience when it comes to picking up new skills or new trades or new information. At the heart of this whole process is repetition. It's the drilling of the movement over and over and over until you get better. There's just no way around that. My cross-country ski seasons are generally pretty robust compared to many people. I don't mean to brag or boast about how lucky I am to be able to ski as much as I am. I've made it part of my life so that I can ski that much because it means that much to me. For the 2019 and 2020 season, I managed to get in 103 days, even with the ski season effectively closing down about a month early. Of those 103 days, I logged about 533 miles and just shy of 50,000 feet of elevation gain. Now, I won't discuss the 2018-2019 season because that was far bigger than this last season. My purpose for the 2019-2020 season, it was very targeted and very focused on a couple of specific techniques. Obviously, I had fun the whole time, and there were days that I just went out to go look at scenery or to ski with friends. And that's fine because that's part of the experience. And keep in mind that of those 103 days that I skied, about half of those were off trail and in the back country. This little run out here was actually pretty close to my home, and I just kept going up and down because it was really fun and pretty fast. But the snow is getting pretty sticky at this point in the day because it is later in spring, being that it's March 25th. I'm throwing the fast forward on for you because I don't want to make you sit through the 5 minutes of grueling uphill. I tell you what, it's a great workout, and by the time the winter is over, I've lost a lot of weight. I usually have to tighten up that belt another notch. I kind of like it. The follow-up questions or conversations to my experience of backcountry cross-country skiing usually entails talking about gear. I'll be the first to admit that I'm a total gear nut, but there's nothing more annoying to me than talking about gear. It either works or it doesn't work, and if you've watched any of my other videos, I always say there's a tool for every job and a job for every tool. So yes, I have multiple cross-country skis, multiple backcountry cross-country skis, and each one serves a purpose. It just may not be getting used every time. In part, that's because each set of skis, for example, does work better in certain environments. A wider ski works better in deep snow, and a more narrow ski is just fine in firm snow. It's really that simple as far as I'm concerned. But another thing about owning multiple pairs of skis is that I don't have to worry about burning through one set of skis too quickly. If I have a couple of different sets of shoes, for example, versus just having one shoe that I wear all the time, those multiple sets of shoes are going to last me a lot longer than if I were to use the same pair of shoes for everything all the time. By having a couple different sets of skis, you can spread load some of the work that any one of them will end up incurring. If you were to press me to talk about the specific skis that I use, I have a modest quiver of Fischer brand off-track and backcountry cross-country skis. I have Spider 62s, Excursion 88s, S-Bound 98s, and a set of S-Bound 112s. And as I mentioned, the deeper the snow, the bigger the ski. That's kind of my litmus test. It's not really any more scientific than that. But the main reason I've gravitated toward Fischer off-track skis is mostly because they feel more stiff to me than some of the other off-track skis that I've used in the past. Because they're more stiff, there's more response when diagonal striding. I've learned a whole lot on how to diagonal stride. That's where I put most of my emphasis on. So if I can find a tool that accentuates or augments the skills that I already have, I'm going to use that. Perhaps if you came from an alpine or downhill skiing experience, you'd want a softer ski to allow you to turn easier going downhill because that would be your strength. For me, however, a stiffer ski seems to be more helpful to me and allows me to use the strengths that I already have. I see a lot of people dive down the rabbit hole when it comes to gear and wax selection, for example. Or they fall into the trap of believing that skiing is only fun when conditions are primo or at their best. As an instructor and rental shop employee, I watch them after they finally go out and ski and see their technique, and it becomes obvious to me why they hem and haw about getting everything right. It's often because their technique is not very good. I don't want you to feel like I'm watching you when you're out on the trails or out in the meadow, but I am, because I want to learn from you, and sometimes that learning experience is seeing what other people are doing wrong. As an instructor, I'm not really supposed to say that somebody is skiing wrong, but rather that there's probably a better way in which to ski. Semantics and judgment aside, I simply want to impress upon you the idea that rather than focusing on all the external factors such as gear, weather, and wax, I really recommend investing in yourself. And this means taking lessons, learning proper technique, updating your skills. All those internal things are transferable to a high degree regardless of what kind of gear you're running. When you're adept at your craft, you can modify your technique to accommodate just about any environment or any piece of gear. I've trained in many different physical disciplines over the course of my life, and I can say with 100% certainty that this philosophy is the same in every one of those disciplines. This isn't some sort of new or progressive concept. In fact, probably every coach or instructor that you've ever had has told you the same thing. Invest in learning technique and skills rather than relying on gear or the conditions to determine whether or not you have a good time, a successful outcome, a great workout, or just a fun experience. I'd be remiss for not reiterating the fact that your safety is your responsibility, and safety is paramount when cross-country skiing in the back country. So even though you can go out and do some lower angle stuff, you can ski through meadows or on flat terrain, kind of like what I've shown in a lot of these clips here, you still have a better chance of being safe and having a good time if you understand technique better. So all that stuff I'm talking about, invest in yourself, invest in your fitness, invest in your technique, this all leads to being safer in the backcountry As you become a more proficient skier over time and push yourself a little bit harder, travel a little bit further, there does become this little bit of a paradox, right? Because no matter how good of a skier you are, if you end up going 5 miles, 10 miles into the backcountry and injure yourself, it doesn't matter that you can diagonal stride great because you're not going anywhere with that leg injury. So as you push yourself to further limits, you definitely need to be more conscious about what you're doing. But in theory, being in better physical shape and knowing good technique will help to mitigate a lot of your risk. I suspect that it's pretty obvious at this point that I love technique. Regardless of sport or physical endeavor, I love to learn body movement. Cross-country skiing is all about body movement. So you're moving your body through space and time. Fortunately, it's moving it through the outdoors, which I absolutely love. So the last thing that I wanted to touch upon is that even though I love technique and I promote technique, technique in and of itself is not the goal. The goal is to get outside and explore the wilderness. But in order to do that, you do need to have some confidence and some means of staying safe and moving efficiently. So that's where technique and even the gear comes in, right? Gear is simply, in my mind, a tool for exploration. Again, it either works or it doesn't. And if you invest in yourself and invest in learning technique, you should be able to make what gear you have work for you. And if it doesn't, you buy new gear. I'm going to go ahead and observe a couple of minutes of silence here as I negotiate this upcoming terrain feature. And you'll see why in just a second. So this day, April 6, 2020, was my last cross-country skiing day of the 2019-2020 season. As you can see, it's absolutely beautiful. Bluebird sky, snow-flocked trees, and I'm all by myself in the backcountry. I love it. But because it's so late in the season, within a couple of hours of getting off of the trail on this particular day, all the snow that was in the trees had fallen out. So for those couple of hours that I was out skiing first thing in the morning, I was able to witness the beautiful landscape, but then it was gone. A little bit of a bittersweet ending to my season, And I probably could have extended it longer by traveling more into the backcountry and finding higher elevation snow. But because of the coronavirus thing and not wanting to potentially injure myself and have to call in emergency medical services, I just decided this day would be good enough for me to call my last for the season. At this point, I'm going to just call it. I think I've run my mouth plenty, and I don't really have much more to say. It was a great season. I applaud you for sticking around this long. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you have any feedback or questions, please post it in the comment section below. Visit TahoeTrailGuide.com for more information. And enjoy the last few minutes of this video. I put a couple of bloopers at the end, so you may get a chuckle or two out of them. Take care, everyone.
Okay, I'm following your feet.
Oh.